My wife and her family called it a prank when they abandoned me in the wilderness. I called it an opportunity to erase them slowly and permanently. I believed love could overcome any boundary. That's the kind of naive optimism you can afford when you're a construction engineer from a modest background, who somehow caught the eye of Sierra Collins. Yes, those Collins, the Portland real estate empire built by Walter Collins himself, a man who looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his Italian leather shoes. For 3 years, I chased Sierra, captivated by her rebellious spirit and the way she seemed to reject her family's elitism. When she finally agreed to marry me, I thought we'd proven something profound about love transcending class. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't breaking into their world. I was being tolerated as her little experiment in slumming. You know what would be perfect for your 34th birthday? Erin, Sierra suggested one evening, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. A weekend at Whispering Pines, my family's cabin. I should have recognized the warning signs. The cabin was Collins' family sanctuary, a place Walter had never invited me before. Yet suddenly, Elaine was calling with stilted birthday wishes and insisting we use the property. Even Walter sent an expensive bottle of scotch with a card bearing his signature. Not a personal message, just his name scrawled like an afterthought. But the most unsettling moment came during the drive up. Sierra's friends had joined us, Brittany the ringleader with a razor smile, Madison, whose backhanded compliments felt like psychological warfare, and Chloe, who laughed at everything while her eyes remained cold as winter. "Remember last Christmas, Erin?" Madison said out of nowhere, her voice honeyed with false nostalgia. "When we put salt in your coffee instead of sugar, you handled that prank like such a good sport." Brittany leaned over, whispering something to Sierra while staring at me with calculated intensity. They shared a look I couldn't decipher, but it sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The cabin was everything you'd expect: rustic luxury, panoramic forest views, and isolation that felt increasingly oppressive as the evening progressed. After dinner, Sierra took my hand. "I have a special birthday surprise for you outside." Her familiar perfume enveloped me as she secured a silk scarf over my eyes. "Trust me," she whispered, but something in her voice sounded rehearsed. I heard a champagne cork pop, followed by Brittany and Madison's stifled giggles behind me. Then everything happened too quickly. Strong hands gripping my wrists, the harsh rip of tape, the sudden pressure of my arms being yanked backward. "What the hell are you doing?" I struggled, disoriented by the blindfold. Walter's voice came from nearby, calm and almost bored. "Relax, Erin. It's just a traditional birthday initiation." The tape bit into my flesh as they secured me to what felt like a tree trunk. Someone, Walter or perhaps one of Sierra's friends, ripped another piece of tape across my mouth. I felt the click of expensive heels approaching. "Don't be angry." Elaine's voice was close to my ear, soft but venomous. "Everyone needs to learn when to be silent." Then came the toast crystal glasses clinking as they celebrated my birthday. While I stood bound and gagged, I heard Sierra's laugh, the same one I'd fallen in love with now, twisted into something unrecognizable. "Happy birthday, Erin." Walter's voice dripped with amusement. "Consider this your first real Collins family tradition." Car doors slammed, engines started. I kept thinking they would come back in minutes. This was just the setup for the real surprise. But as the vehicle sounds faded into the distance, silence descended, broken only by the whisper of wind through pine needles. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. The night air grew colder, the forest darker. The truth settled in my stomach like concrete. They weren't coming back. My phone wallet. Watch all gone. The temperature dropped as night deepened, and the damp earth smell grew stronger with the coming rain. What had begun as confusion morphed into fear, then crystallized into pure rage. I thrashed against my restraints, feeling skin tear at my wrists, but the tape only tightened its grip. Then I heard it rustling in the underbrush nearby. Not human footsteps, but something heavier, something that moved with purpose. A low growl vibrated through the darkness, closer than I would have thought possible. I held my breath as whatever it was approached, my mind racing with one desperate thought. Was this a wild predator drawn by the scent of blood from my raw wrists, or had they left something else behind, some final act in their cruel performance? The growl grew louder, and I braced myself for teeth and claws. Instead, a startled deer emerged from the underbrush, its eyes reflecting moonlight before it bounded away. I almost laughed through the tape covering my mouth almost. That innocent creature had inadvertently delivered a sobering message in these woods. There would be no second chances if I didn't save myself. I remembered a job site in Montana 3 years back. The foreman had shown us how to escape zip ties by using body weight to create pressure. Duct tape wasn't the same, but the principle might work. I started rocking my body against the tree, feeling the rough bark scrape my back raw through my shirt. With each movement, I worked my wrists against the tape, ignoring the searing pain as my skin tore open. Blood made my hands slick. I used it twisting and contorting until I could feel the tape beginning to give. For nearly 3 hours I wrestled against my restraints, my determination fueled by rage and the primal will to survive. When the tape finally ripped enough for me to pull one hand free, I collapsed at the base of the tree, gasping through my nostrils, my chest heaving in the frigid night air. I peeled the tape from my mouth and eyes, wincing as it took skin and stubble with it. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. My fingers were numb, my wrists shredded and throbbing. Using a sturdy branch as a makeshift walking stick, I began trudging aimlessly through the darkness. Distant wolf howls carried on the wind. My empty stomach clenched painfully, and my limbs felt leaden with exhaustion. Reality crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't a prank, it was a death sentence. The Collins family hadn't just abandoned me. They'd left me to die. As dawn broke, I was still stumbling forward, driven by nothing but stubbornness and hatred. My vision blurred from dehydration when I spotted it, a thin wisp of smoke rising above the tree-lined civilization. Or at least someone who might help. I followed a shallow stream, reasoning it might lead toward the smoke. After what felt like another eternity, I came upon a dilapidated ranger station that looked abandoned years ago. But the smoke was real, curling from a rusted chimney pipe I barely had strength to knock. When the door swung open, I faced the barrel of a hunting rifle before I saw the man holding it. Weathered face, silver-streaked beard, piercing eyes that had seen too much, all topped with a worn flannel shirt. "Please," I croaked, my voice barely functioning. He looked me over, taking in my torn clothes, bleeding wrists, and desperate expression. No questions, no sympathy, just 4 words. "If you want to live, come in." The cabin was sparse but functional. He dropped a can of cold beans in front of me and tossed a threadbare blanket my way, watching me with suspicious calculation as I devoured the food. "Name?" he finally asked, cleaning his rifle with practiced ease. I hesitated. Aaron Hale felt like a dead man. My old life had ended tied to that pine tree. "Noah." I answered, the name coming from nowhere. "Noah Grayson." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Garrett Boone," he offered, then went back to his rifle. Nothing more needed saying. He recognized a man running from something worse than the wilderness. I slept for 2 days straight, my body recovering, while my mind replayed the betrayal on endless loop. Whenever I closed my eyes, I heard Brittany and Madison giggling, saw Walter's smug satisfaction, felt Sierra's hand guiding me to that tree. When I could function again, Garrett began teaching me not out of kindness, but pragmatic necessity. He showed me how to build a fire in driving rain, set snares for rabbits, and handle a knife properly. Not for fighting. He corrected when I practiced a defensive grip, for survival. He demonstrated how to skin game, where to cut for meat, how to preserve what you couldn't eat immediately. At night, he'd smoke hand-rolled cigarettes, occasionally glancing my way with assessment. "Silence is your best ally when you want to disappear," he said one evening, the statement hanging in the air like his smoke. A week into my stay, Garrett switched on an ancient radio for the morning news. I froze when I heard my name. "Portland authorities continue searching for Aaron Hale, reported missing by his wife Sierra Collins. Hale sources close to the family indicate Hale had a history of depression and may have left voluntarily following a family disagreement." My fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. Blood rushed to my head as understanding dawned. They hadn't just abandoned me to die. They'd constructed a narrative that would protect them if I somehow survived. Garrett watched my reaction, nodding slowly. "Now you get it," he said, grinding out his cigarette. "Not everyone deserves an explanation." That night I asked Garrett if he knew someone who could help me make Aaron Hale permanently disappear. He mentioned a name, Victor Kane, someone who specialized in helping people who needed to vanish. While waiting for this mysterious Victor, I found an old journal in Garrett's cabin. On the first blank page, I wrote words that would become my manifesto. They thought I would break, but I'm rising, and this time, I forget nothing. 3 days later, Victor arrived, a nondescript man who could blend into any crowd. He placed a thick envelope on the table before me. New identity, social security, basic backstory, he explained, then paused, studying my face. But I have to ask, are you looking to disappear forever, or are you just preparing to come back and bury someone? I stared at Victor Kane's question about burying someone. A cold smile forming on my face. Let's just say I'm keeping my options open. He nodded, understanding perfectly. The envelope contained everything I needed for rebirth. An Oregon state ID for Noah Grayson, born 1990, a legitimate social security number. Bank accounts untraceable to my former self, and a burner phone no one could track. From this moment forward, Aaron Hale is gone. Victor warned, eyes serious. Remember, dead men don't get to come back to life. Noah Grayson isn't coming back to life, I replied, feeling the weight of the new identity in my hands. He's being born. Garrett arranged a rusted trailer at the edge of the forest near an industrial zone, a perfect anonymous starting point. The trailer leaked when it rained and creaked in the wind, but it was mine. No Collins' name on the deed, no strings attached, no paper trail. I took whatever work paid cash and asked no questions. Hauling lumber at the sawmill left my hands calloused and bleeding. Demolition work on abandoned buildings coated my lungs with dust but strengthened my arms. Mixing concrete at construction sites in the freezing rain taught me endurance. Each dollar earned went toward survival essentials tools, and eventually a broken laptop I salvaged from a junkyard and repaired myself. Every morning I rose before dawn and transformed my body with brutal efficiency. I ran through forest trails until my lungs burned. Used rocks as weights, hung a makeshift punching bag from a tree. The rage that once consumed me became controlled fuel, a perpetual engine driving me forward. Twice weekly, Garrett taught me skills Aaron Hale never possessed. How to shoot with deadly accuracy, how to use a combat knife. Most importantly, how to observe like a predator patient, calculating, seeing weaknesses. Others missed your enemy's greatest advantage. Garrett said, is thinking you're still the same man they left in the woods. I shaved my beard clean, cut my hair military short. The face in the mirror belonged to a stranger, leaner, harder eyes, holding a cold certainty that Aaron Hale never possessed. One rainy night, staring at my laptop screen, I remembered something from my old life. I'd designed logos and flyers for the local church, simple creative work that Sierra and her family had dismissed as a hobby beneath their notice. Now I would transform that dismissed talent into a weapon. I taught myself coding and advanced graphic design through free online courses, working until my eyes burned. Once ready, I started taking anonymous freelance projects through underground forums, brand designs for small shops, website fixes for failing businesses. My prices were low, my work exceptional, my identity a mystery. Clients knew me only as Grayson Creative. Within a year, my work gained attention. Through Victor's intermediary, I established Grayson Creative Solutions as a legitimate LLC. Larger businesses began seeking me out to resurrect their failing brands. The irony wasn't lost on me, the man left for dead. Now specialized in bringing dead things back to life. I operated entirely in the shadows. No face-to-face meetings, all transactions through encrypted emails, VPNs, and voice-only calls. The mystery only enhanced my reputation. The first time I truly felt power wasn't physical. It was when a struggling fintech startup implemented my rebranding strategy and doubled their valuation overnight. The name Noah Grayson began circulating in entrepreneurial circles as some kind of business savant. You don't have to be visible to control an entire system. I realized watching from afar as companies transformed under my guidance. Garrett, still a presence in my life, noticed the shift in me. Don't let hate be your compass, he warned during one of our infrequent meetings. But I knew better. Hate hadn't weakened me. It had crystallized my purpose. Hate kept me alive. I told him, now it's teaching me to thrive. 3 years after my disappearance, Pinnacle magazine contacted me. They were intrigued by the mysterious figure behind several spectacular corporate turnarounds. I agreed to an interview entirely on my terms. I controlled every question, every photograph revealing nothing of my past. When the magazine hit newsstands with my face on the cover, the ghost behind the brands, I held it with strange detachment. The man in the photo with his calculated gaze and sharp features bore no resemblance to Aaron Hale. Even I couldn't see my former self in those eyes. That's when they found me. Or rather, when they found Noah Grayson, not realizing who he really was. It started with strange calls, then emails with subject lines like, "We need to talk," and "Please forgive us." One by one, they emerged from the past: Sierra, Elaine, Walter, even Brittany, Madison, and Chloe. Each message more desperate than the last. I never responded. Just watched as their desperation grew. From my invisible vantage point, I observed the Collins family empire beginning to crumble. Walter's company faced multiple lawsuits. Sierra's carefully curated social media presence showed signs of strain. Elaine's charity foundation lost major donors. They didn't know I was behind any of it. I wasn't directly. But success had given me connections, and connections had given me information. Information about the Collins Group's financial irregularities, Walter's questionable land deals, Elaine's misappropriated foundation funds. I hadn't needed to act. I simply needed to wait and watch as their own corruption caught up with them. My existence as Noah Grayson, successful, untouchable, was revenge enough. Or so I thought. Until the email arrived with Walter Collins's name in my inbox. Subject line: "This isn't just about money, we need to meet." I smiled as I read it, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The man who once looked through me as if I were nothing now begged for my attention. The family that had left me to die now sought my help. For the first time in years, I felt something other than cold determination. I felt satisfaction. Because now finally I would be the one setting the terms. Walter's desperate email deserved more than a simple response. It demanded a masterpiece of vengeance, carefully orchestrated, emotionally devastating, and impossible to escape. I crafted a new identity, Preston Whitmore, a reclusive investor specializing in salvaging failing family businesses. With Victor's help, I built an immaculate digital footprint, a professional website featuring fabricated success stories, social media accounts with years of carefully curated content, and planted PR articles on financial forums praising Whitmore's unorthodox but effective methods. Everything about Preston Whitmore was designed to appeal to the Collins family's desperation, a savior who worked exclusively with legacy businesses, a financial guardian angel who understood family values, a private individual who avoided publicity, all qualities that would intrigue rather than alarm them. I sent a brief, carefully worded investment proposal to Collins Group. The company was drowning in debt and scandal, exactly where I wanted them. The proposal mentioned nothing specific, just hinted at substantial capital injection and reputation rehabilitation. Elaine responded first. Her email oozed fake warmth and aristocratic courtesy, the same veneer she'd worn while watching her husband abandon me in the wilderness. "Mr. Whitmore, we're absolutely delighted by your interest in our humble family enterprise," Walter called next day, his voice straining to project confidence while panic simmered underneath. He suggested meetings at their downtown office, their country club, their lawyer's firm. I declined every location. "I prefer traditional settings," I explained. "Somewhere quiet where I can feel the core values of a family business is about numbers, but investment is about trust." Then I sprang my trap. "I understand your family has a cabin retreat. Whispering Pines, is it?" That sounds perfect for our discussion. A moment of silence on Elaine's end when I suggested it. I could almost hear her mental calculations weighing desperation against suspicion. "That's actually a wonderful idea." She finally responded, too eager to question how I knew about their private retreat. "We haven't been there in some time, but it holds special meaning for our family." Special meaning indeed. I spent the week before our meeting, preparing my arsenal, not weapons, but truth. Each piece of evidence meticulously compiled, the missing person report with its fabricated timeline and malicious insinuations about my mental health. Photographs of the old pine tree with visible scars from where the tape had cut into the bark. Audio recordings of their recent desperate messages spliced together to highlight their hypocrisy. Documents from Walter's former business partner, revealing fraudulent contracts I'd quietly obtained years ago. Each piece was a knife aimed at the pride they'd always protected with their glossy veneer of perfection. I arrived at Whispering Pines 2 hours early, standing before the same pine tree where they'd left me to die. The bark had healed, but I could still see the marks, not unlike the scars on my wrists that had faded to thin white lines. When the Collins motorcade pulled up, I positioned myself by that tree dressed in an impeccable black suit. My posture relaxed, yet commanding. Their faces as they emerged from their luxury vehicles showed only curiosity about meeting the mysterious Preston Whitmore. Then Sierra saw me. Really saw me. Her eyes widened in recognition color, draining from her face. She clutched Walter's arm, whispering something that made him stop mid-stride. One by one, recognition dawned on their faces. Impossible. Walter whispered, his voice carrying in the mountain air. Not impossible. I replied calmly. Just highly improbable. Kind of like surviving being abandoned in these woods, bound to a tree. They stood frozen. Sierra, Walter, Elaine, and even the 3 friends who had participated in my attempted murder, Brittany, Madison, and Chloe. All of them staring as though seeing a ghost. I gestured toward the cabin with practiced ease. Shall we? I believe we have business to discuss. Inside, I placed a sealed envelope before each of them, their names handwritten in elegant script. Please open them. Each envelope contained personalized evidence of their involvement that night, along with a single handwritten note. You forgot me, but I never forgot you. Walter attempted negotiation, offering money power partnerships, anything to buy silence. Elaine feigned emotional fragility, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. Sierra openly sobbed, begging forgiveness. Brittany, Madison, and Chloe huddled together, reduced to cornered prey animals. I remained silent, letting them drown in the fear they'd created. My silence forced them to fill the void with increasingly desperate offers and pleas, each one stripping away another layer of their dignity. Finally, I spoke. I haven't released any of this information. Not yet, but every document, recording, and photograph is ready to go public if anything happens to me or if I simply decide the time is right. What do you want? Walter demanded, his authoritative facade crumbling. Nothing. I answered simply, no money, no apology. I just want you to know that from this moment forward, every step you take, every deal you make, every breath you draw happens because I allow it. I stood to leave, buttoning my suit jacket with unhurried precision. I don't need to destroy you. You'll destroy yourselves living in this fear. The perfect revenge wasn't ruining them instantly. It was making them participants in their own slow-motion destruction. As I drove away from the cabin, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Not everyone will submit so easily. Watch your back. I smiled at the anonymous threat. Someone still had fight left in them. The game, it seemed, wasn't quite over. After leaving the cabin, I did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that was the most devastating move I could have made. They expected immediate retaliation, press releases, leaked documents, public accusations. Instead, I gave them silence. I let them live in perpetual anticipation of destruction, never knowing when or how the axe would fall. My phone and email accounts became flooded with their increasingly desperate attempts at contact. Sierra's messages began with tearful apologies. I never meant for it to go so far. Walter's started with thinly veiled threats, then devolved into offers of substantial compensation for your discretion. Elaine's were calculated appeals to forgiveness and Christian charity, ironic coming from a woman who had whispered poison in my ear while I was bound and helpless. Brittany, Madison, and Chloe reached out too, each blaming the others, each claiming they'd been just following along. Their fair-weather friendship collapsed under the weight of mutual self-preservation. I read every message but replied to none. Silence was my sharpest blade. 2 weeks after our cabin meeting, I activated my dead man switch, a system that would automatically release all evidence to journalists, police, and Collins Group competitors if anything happened to me or if I simply failed to reset it every 72 hours. It wasn't just protection, it was psychological warfare. They would never know if today was the day everything would collapse around them. I began strategically releasing controlled rumors about Collins Group's financial improprieties through anonymous accounts on investment forums. Nothing libelous, nothing I couldn't prove, just enough to make potential investors nervous. Has anyone looked closely at the Collins land deal in the South Waterfront? Numbers don't add up. Hearing whispers about unreported loans to shell companies connected to Walter Collins' brother-in-law, small seeds of doubt planted in fertile ground. Their stock began to slide. Long-standing business partners suddenly needed more time to consider pending deals. Journalists started asking questions about irregularities in their financial reporting and about a missing person case from a decade ago. The Collins empire began cracking apart like ice in spring. A whistleblower from inside Elaine's charity foundation revealed she had been siphoning donations to cover personal expenses and family debts. I hadn't planted this information, I'd simply created an environment where truth could flourish. Walter faced criminal charges after documentation emerged, showing he had forged signatures on property transfers, evidence I'd quietly obtained years earlier and anonymously provided to the district attorney. Brittany Madison and Chloe found themselves implicated in a money laundering scheme involving fake startups funded by Collins family money. Their expensive lawyers couldn't protect them from federal investigators who smelled blood in the water. Media outlets began reinvestigating my disappearance, questioning the narrative the Collins family had constructed. Aaron Hale, depressed husband or victim of foul play. Headlines asked, no one connected. Noah Grayson to Aaron Hale. I remained safely anonymous, watching the destruction from afar. Sierra proved the most resilient of them all. She hired a team of attorneys to shield herself, claiming ignorance of her family's financial crimes. When that strategy faltered, she pivoted to social media, casting herself as a victim of circumstance and misunderstanding. Her carefully curated posts showed a woman healing from family trauma and seeking truth and reconciliation. I watched her performance with cold amusement. Sierra had always been the most skilled actor among them. It was time to end her charade. I anonymously released a single audio clip to a popular internet forum, the sound of Sierra laughing as car doors slammed, followed by her voice saying, "He'll be fine, probably. And if not, who's going to miss him anyway?" I attached no names, no context, just the raw audio with a vague caption about the sound of attempted murder. Internet sleuths quickly connected it to Sierra's carefully constructed victim narrative. Her followers turned on her overnight. Her carefully cultivated image of innocence shattered beyond repair. When Collins Group officially filed for bankruptcy, I made my final move. I compiled a complete dossier, including panicked emails from Walter and Elaine, essentially confessing to leaving me in the wilderness, and sent it to an investigative reporter known for thorough, devastating exposés. The story broke like a tsunami. Decade-old disappearance was attempted murder, the horrifying truth behind the Collins family. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Aaron and Collins scandal, trending nationwide. I watched from a distance like a predator observing its prey's final moments. I hadn't directly caused their destruction. I had simply removed the obstacles that had protected them from consequences for years. One by one, they faced their reckonings. Walter Collins, convicted of financial fraud and document forgery, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, his reputation destroyed beyond rehabilitation. Elaine Collins, personally bankrupt, assets seized, living in exile from the high society that once revered her. Now shunned as a pariah, Sierra Collins became synonymous with betrayal and fakery, unemployable, untouchable, living in the shame she had tried to inflict on me. Brittany Madison and Chloe faced prosecution for financial crimes, abandoned by former friends. Their social standing annihilated. I hadn't needed to physically harm any of them. The truth had been weapon enough. A month after the dust began to settle, a handwritten letter arrived at my office. No return address, but I recognized Sierra's handwriting immediately. "If you think you've won, you don't understand the full game yet," the letter read. I considered the threat, wondering if Sierra's hatred had enough power left to fuel one final counterattack. Perhaps she did have one last move to make. But then again, so did I. Sierra's letter was a desperate final grasp at control, one I decided to address directly. I arranged to meet her at a small coffee shop in Seattle Neutral Ground for what would be our first and final face-to-face encounter. She arrived 15 minutes late, a power play that might have worked on the old Aaron Hale. Now it just seemed pathetic. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, her once perfect makeup barely concealing dark circles and worry lines. Though visibly diminished, her eyes still held that residual arrogance, the dying embers of a once blazing entitlement. We sat across from each other, two strangers sharing nothing but a poisoned history. The coffee between us grew cold, untouched. "You look good, Aaron," she finally said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Success suits you." "Noah," I corrected her. "Aaron died in those woods. Noah, then." She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "We can bury the past. Start fresh. You have money, I have connections. Even now, there are people who owe me favors. We could be remarkable together." I looked directly into her eyes, the same eyes that had once watched me struggle against my bonds before leaving me to die. "Don't you understand? I don't need to start over with someone who once treated me like garbage." I placed an envelope on the table between us. Inside was a copy of an article I'd written anonymously that had been syndicated worldwide, "The Man They Tried to Bury." "I don't need your apology," I told her quietly. "I just need you to keep living. And every time you hear my name, remember who actually won." Sierra's face hardened. "You think you're so much better than us now, but you've become exactly what you hated. Cruel, calculating, obsessed with power." "The difference," I replied, standing to leave, "is that I never pretended to be anything else." That evening, I returned to my Seattle apartment where Nia was helping our daughter Marin with dinner. They'd entered my life 3 years after my rebirth, as Noah Nia, a graphic designer who contracted with my company, and eventually Marin, our surprise blessing, who knew nothing of Aaron Hale or the Collins family. "Daddy, look." Marin ran to me holding a crayon drawing 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "It's us." I lifted her up, studying the innocent illustration of a perfect family untainted by my past. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, the best thing I've ever seen." Later that night, after Marin was asleep, I opened the fireproof safe in my office and removed a USB drive containing every piece of evidence against the Collins family. I'd kept it as insurance, as leverage, as a reminder. Now, watching the flame of the lighter lick at its plastic casing, I realized it was merely an anchor to a past I no longer needed. The USB melted in the metal trash can, releasing me from my final tether to Aaron Hale. I thought of Garrett Boone, who had passed peacefully in his sleep the previous year. His last words to me echoed, "You'll know you're truly free when you no longer need anyone to remember who you were." Grayson Creative Solutions continued to thrive, but I gradually shifted my focus toward family and community projects, supporting survivors of psychological abuse. My anonymously published writings became resources for those rebuilding their lives, never mentioning the Collins family by name, focused instead on the power of resilience and reinvention. I received invitations to speak at conferences on healing after trauma, but always declined. I didn't need spotlights or validation. My victory wasn't in public recognition, but in the quiet knowledge that I had reclaimed control of my story. 6 months after our coffee shop meeting, news reached me that Sierra had left the country, settling in a small European village where no one knew her name or her shame. I smiled, not from vindictive pleasure, but from knowing that for people like the Collins family, being forgotten and losing control of their narrative was the most fitting punishment of all. That evening, Nia Marine and I sat on our balcony, watching the sunset. My daughter's laughter echoed against the peaceful sky as she pointed out cloud shapes. Nia's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with the same scars that once marked my captivity. "You seem different lately," she observed, lighter somehow. "I finally let something go." I replied, "The true power I had learned wasn't in revenge, but in living a life your enemies could never touch or taint. I had become something that transcended their betrayal, not just a survivor, but a creator of my own existence." As darkness settled over the city, I whispered a final truth to the night air. They once left me in silence. Now that same silence will bury them forever. The man they tried to bury had indeed become the seeds of their destruction. But more importantly, he had grown into something they could never comprehend, a man at peace with his power, surrounded by genuine love, living completely beyond their reach.